Hi darlings, welcome to this witchy Q&A on my channel. Thank you so much for being here and spending some time with me. Over on Facebook recently, I asked people if there were any confused witches in the house. Any witches with issues, any witches who are finding that currently their witchy path in particular is going through a lot of tumultuous, weird energy, questions that have not quite been answered yet, just sticky bits, weird bits basically, to see if I can be of any assistance in a Q&A on my channel. Now, I'm not saying by any means that I'm the Grand High Witch and I know the answers to everything and I can get you back on the road to witchhood before you know it and I'm going to sew everything up, because that is simply not true. Everybody's path is so individual and far be it from me or any other witch to tell you what to do. But what I would like is for this Q&A to be nurturing, to be kind, to be a compassionate look at some of your questions and confusions, to see if maybe little old me, somebody who themselves has had many confusions on the witchy path before and come through them and come back brighter, can be of any assistance or support. So if this video is even remotely helpful to you by the end, then that has been the aim that I wanted to accomplish. I've achieved my aim with this video. So let me go through some of the stuff that came up in the comment section underneath my Facebook post. So first of all, I'll tell you what I posted. I said, "Darlings, I'm looking for witches who are currently dealing with uncertainty and confusion. Do you have questions or concerns about where your path is going, how to be a more powerful witch, where to start, or how to bounce back after a slump? Do you wonder what the best methods are for achieving your aims? Are you confused about divination, sabbats, or working with deities? Please leave your questions for me down below. I'll be doing a Q&A on my channel, in the next few days to inspire witches to take bold action, dissolve obstacles, and make magic happen." So basically I've left the floor open to quite a wide range of different focus areas that we can look at. So let's see what came up and I'll see if I can give you any help whatsoever. I'll see if I can throw you a few witchy ropes, darlings. In my spiritual path, I feel a bit lost. Mostly I think I just need connection. That was a big part of my spirituality when I was following the Abrahamic religion. And though I've been pagan for many years now, I find it lonely. How can you feel more connected whilst fellowshipping so far apart? Is there a good way to practice with others and not always feel so isolated on this eclectic path? Well, darling, the fact that you are asking me this question via the medium of the internet is partly what is going to be my answer. Because I think when you are used to fellowship and you're used to being able to congregate together and you feel that connection was a big part of what sort of communing with the divine was about for you, it makes sense that on an eclectic witchy path, you would use the internet to make that connection with other witches and talk about things that you empathize with other witches on their paths, and talk about books that you find interesting, talk about experiences that you've had that kind of overlap, find common ground with other witches. If you don't want to join a coven, if you don't want to be part of a group that actually does ritual and spellcraft together, but you do miss that feeling of fellowship, the internet is a really good tool for getting witches together. I tend to find that a lot of the witchy groups that congregate now are a lot more focused and committed and interactive, because we have things like Patreon where you can go to get sort of like that extra sense of connection and that more directed conversation that happens. So on top of the Facebook groups that you've got where you've got all kinds of different witches asking questions, answering questions, hobnobbing with each other, you've got the YouTube witchy community, but then you've also got certain witches that have a platform and an audience around their work taking some of their discussions onto Patreon. And on Patreon they have book clubs, they have discords, they have different conversations that they have every month where they all sort of interact and get together and maybe do rituals together or read the same book and then talk about it in a conversation. So you find that you've got more direction and you've got that group vibe that I sense perhaps you're looking for. Obviously, if you do want to do magical workings with other witches, then you can look for groups in your area, you can look for covens that organise online and do kind of like distance workings and things like that. But I kind of sense from your question that what you're asking is, how do I follow a solitary eclectic path but still feel like I'm in fellowship with other people who think and feel similar things to me about divinity? And that's a really fair question. And I do think that a lot of the discussions that go on online can help with that. I know that there are quite a few witches on YouTube who have really amazing Patreon communities where they, like I said, talk about books and talk about various aspects of the craft and stuff like that. I know Discord is blowing up right now with people having all kinds of conversations, and I'm in several really awesome Facebook groups as well, where lots of conversations happen around witchcraft, around the eclectic path, the solitary path, people giving advice and people just really sharing what is going on with their path and stuff. So maybe you need to dip your toe into that water a little bit more to feel like you are actually in conversation with witches, even though you want to have a solitary eclectic path. I know what you mean. It can get pretty weird to like never talk to other people who have similar thoughts and feelings, even though you may want to practice as a solitary witch. Sometimes it's just lovely to know that there are other practitioners out there and you can have those chats. So definitely utilize the internet. That's one thing that I will say. And don't forget, you can choose your level of involvement with the communities that you engage with. You don't have to go gung-ho straight into something and become sort of a mainstay in that community. If you feel like you just want to kind of hover around, maybe chat a little bit, lurk, see what people are saying, see what the vibe is like, you can do that. But it sounds like there's just a sense that you would like to interact more. And I think that even just leaving this comment and getting this question answered is a way of, it's a good example of how the internet can be used to make that happen. I've been in a very difficult position this year where I wonder if I've confused depression with spiritual need. So I'm feeding my spirituality in an attempt to fill a void, but wonder if it's disingenuous. How can you differentiate between real spiritual need and depression, or a spiritual calling from a depressive emptiness? And is there a need to differentiate it? This is a really complex question because it's very much dependent on the individual experience of depression and what that means to someone in terms of like how it manifests in their life. I don't want to be prescriptive. I mean, I never want to be prescriptive, so I could say that about every question I've ever answered, to be fair. I do not want to be prescriptive. As somebody who struggles with depression myself and has done for many, 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 many moons, I will tell you that from my perspective, I don't feel the need to differentiate between a depressive emptiness that needs to be filled by spirit or communion with divinity, and a genuine feeling that I am ready to be a receptacle for spirit to enter. I don't see any need to differentiate because I often feel like one of the most healing tools at my disposal and one of the greatest remedies for me when I am going through depression is that connection with divinity, however I can get it, whatever package it's going to come in. And so I think for my own survival, I choose not to differentiate between the two. So if you're saying, am I just wanting to reach out for this because I need it to fill a depressive void? I suppose for me, if I thought, am I reaching out for this so it can fill a depressive void? I would think, that doesn't matter. If it fills the depressive void, all the better. It's not a bad thing to fill the depressive void, is it? It's not, it's not an unhealthy toxic relationship or a physically debilitating addictive substance. It's communion with the divine. It's communion with the divine, baby. Like, that's the best thing to reach for when you're depressed. I'm never going to be one of those people who says, throw your meds away, don't bother going to therapy. It's all about the spiritual connection. No, that's definitely not my point of view. And in fact, I will leave down below for anybody who's interested a blog post, which is a conversation that took place between me and my best friend, who's still my best friend. We had a big conversation about spirituality and mental health and medication and depression and all that kind of thing. And it's kind of, it's bringing up the memory of that blog post for me. So I'm going to leave it down below in case anybody wants to read it. But basically in the course of that blog post, we do talk about the various different things that can be tools that can be used when you are going through mental health difficulty. And I certainly would not say everything else is off the table, you just need to connect with spirit. But there's absolutely no doubt that one of the most powerful and potent things that I've done when I'm in that kind of situation is to connect with spirit. So if I feel the instinct to go after that kind of experience, I'm not going to stop and analyse, oh, is this because of my depression? Probably it is because of my depression, but that kind of makes sense to me. So I suppose I wouldn't choose to differentiate between a real calling and a calling that comes from needing a void to be filled. I feel like a lot of the experiences that I've had with connecting with the divine, communing with Goddess, feeling like I'm part of the all those kinds of things, right? Those real transpersonal clicking into the I'm a drop in the big river of consciousness type of feeling, all of that kind of stuff is very therapeutic. It is very medicinal. It is not the only tool in the kit, but if I can get it, it's good and I go with it and I'm not going to argue with it. How do you rebuild after dismantling your practice for several years? As an example, I distanced myself from my practice and community a few years ago to get clear on some things and give myself some distance for free thought. How do you enter back into that after separation and absence? The first thing I would say is that it says in your comment that you had to get clear on some things and you had to give yourself some distance for free thought. It's really hard to say, for free thought. So did you get clear on the things you wanted to get clear on, for a start? Because that would be, I suppose, an important question that would lay the foundations for you going back into your practice. But also, this second part, I needed to give myself some distance for free thought. Your practice should always allow you free thought. So I feel like, in a way, maybe I'm just zooming in on that a little bit too much, but I feel like there's something to be said for examining whereabouts you did not feel that you had the luxury and the right to free thought before. Were you being dragged along by certain trends in the spiritual area you were in, certain beliefs that you felt like you had to go along with? Were you part of a group where you felt like the philosophy or the doctrine was quite rigid and you couldn't really move out of it? Had you put yourself in a box and maybe it was the box of your own making that you had to pull yourself out of? I think when you get clear on whereabouts your free thought was being threatened, you can make sure that you don't end up going back into a situation where your free thought and your free practice is threatened again. So just to kind of summarize, first of all, did you get clear on the things that you needed to get clear on? Second of all, whereabouts was your free thought actually threatened before? Because you want to make sure that you don't go back into any situation or any dialogue or any practice where you feel like, that was actually rigid for me. Once you've sort of figured that stuff out, then I think that if you're coming back towards practice, come back to practice from where you are now. Really seat it in where you are and what you are now. What are your needs now? What are your dearest beliefs now? What are your tastes now? What aesthetics do you enjoy? Really make sure that none of the current practice that you're going to cultivate is rooted anywhere in the past. It's all about who you are in this moment and what speaks to you and what you need in this moment. What do you do when you want to take your craft beyond books? I'm so tired of reading the same stuff over and over, but no new information is easily found. I'm going to leave a video down below that was made by Thorn Mooney. Thorn Mooney is one of my witchy heroes of all time. I absolutely just love her. I got to meet her when she was on her book tour in London and it was just like ridiculous. I'm going to leave a video down below where she kind of explains that witchcraft books are never going to be how you are going to level up, because if you're going to go from being a generalist to being more of a specialist and finding that sort of like, those new layers of information, those other rooms of information, you're going to have to specialize. And when you specialize, you're no longer reading witchy books. You're reading books on a specialist subject like herbalism or, whatever. She'll explain it much better than I will. And I can't really remember. Have I got the premise of that video completely right? I think I have anyway. But basically it's a really good video where she says there are no advanced witchcraft books because advanced witches are specialising in things that are not necessarily specifically witchcraft in essence, but they are part of witchcraft. So they're specialising in geomancy, or they're specialising over here, they're specialising in herbalism, they're specialising in sound healing, so it's basically they're pulling things into their craft that at their core are adjacent to witchcraft, but really enrich witchcraft. So there's that to consider, basically, the fact that you might be reading 101, 101, 101 books on a kind of Rolodex, because when you specialise, you're no longer really reading books about witchcraft per se, you're reading books about a specific form of divination or a specific form of whatever it is you're doing. So I think that definitely has to be taken into account for sure. The other thing I will say is that some of the most potent things that you will learn about what it is to be a witch and what magical power means and what it is to have a relationship with deity, or what it is to glean answers from divinatory tools, etc. Some of the most potent things that you'll learn in any of those areas are just never going to be found in a book, right? It goes beyond that. It's about your personal gnosis. So I would say, ask yourself, how much are you downplaying your own personal gnosis at the present time? Are you in a situation where you're telling yourself that the things in the books are the things that have meaning and they have legitimacy and they are the things that you should follow and they are the things that make sense, they are the things that you should rely on, and the things that have come up in your own experience, the patterns that you have witnessed in your own path don't mean anything? Because I do think we do downplay our own gnosis quite a lot. You know, some of the experiences that I've had, for example, with my matron deity are not based on anything that was written about her. They're not based on anything that any research could point you to. They are my personal gnosis. And some of the experiences that I've had with tarot and the feelings that I have about that particular system are so deep and potent because I've never read them anywhere. They're about my personal dynamic, working, living relationship with the tool. So I do think that we are too quick to surrender our sense of legitimacy and our sense of agency to what is written in the books. What are we being told is okay to believe? What are we being told is okay to follow? And actually our personal gnosis is so much of what it means to level up and to be a more proficient witch and to get the keys to those doors and to unlock those doors and go through. It's all about what you personally know. What have you personally experienced that has never been written in a book? How do you motivate yourself to get back into your practice when your mundane life seems to be taking over and leaving no room to even think about the spiritual in any meaningful way? Maybe I sound a little bit like a cliche when I say this, but basically the first thing that you probably need to do is just stop differentiating quite so much between the magical and the mundane. When you're making a meal, put your intention, your energy, your vibes, your vibrations that you want the whole family to experience into the meal. When you're making a cup of tea, you know, like put that sort of intention into the tea that you would like to drink as you savor the tea, that kind of thing. You know, when you're going around your ordinary business and you overhear some song lyrics blaring out of a car window, or I don't know, just something like that, where it could well be a synchronicity delivered to you from Cosmos that you requested and it's right on time, but it just comes in a very mundane, ordinary, everyday package. The only way that's going to be delivered to you is if you stop putting the emphasis on the idea that you can only have spiritual experiences when you are in sacred space or when you have ample time to be able to feel witchy and sort of build up to the witchiness and be in that state where you're open to spiritual things happening. It's wonderful to have those times. It's amazing to be able to carve out sacred space and do a ritual or that kind of thing. But it is a luxury, as I know you know, because you're asking me this question. How can I get back into practice when the mundane life seems to be taking over and leaving no room to even think about the spiritual in any meaningful way? For somebody in that situation, and I've been in that situation, I know a lot of people have, I would just say, whereabouts are the lines of demarcation for what is spiritual and what is not? And how can we start to play with those lines? How can we blur those lines? I think that's a really important question we can all stand to ask ourselves a little bit more. Why is it that this thing is not spiritual and this thing is spiritual? Why is it that I'm telling myself that this is mundane and cannot therefore be inherently magical at the same time, or it cannot have any mystical potential? So I would really ask you to lean into the barriers that you put around what has mystical potential, spiritual potential, and what doesn't. And sometimes it's ridiculous when you really put a microscope over it, what has spiritual potential for you. And it's so many things that you would never have even believed. And I can say that from my own experience. I definitely don't want to downplay the fact that it can be really difficult to not have ample time to properly, you know, have a cleansing ritual bath and go into sacred space and perform a ritual or do a spell or, you know, properly observe a sabbat or an esbat. It can be really difficult if we do not have the time, the space, the focus for that, and there's too many other things on our plate. So I'm definitely not saying that's not a problem, that's not a concern. I wouldn't say that. I understand why it might be a concern, but I do think we also lock ourselves out of mystical potential hugely by deciding that we can only have mystical experiences in that kind of situation, in that kind of circumstance, with that time and that focus to hand. And that's actually not the case at all. When I stand at a bus stop, I often think this bus stop is an ashram. I have something to learn at this ashram. What am I going to learn? Is it going to be an interaction between the bus driver and a person leaving the bus? Is it going to be somebody that walks by that gives me pause for thought and something to contemplate on? What does this bus stop have to teach me right now? That kind of thing, where the mundane becomes, in essence, something so much bigger than the apparent sum of its parts. How do you practice or move forward spiritually in a chaotic or busy environment? Since having my son, my head's been everywhere and I can't seem to focus on my practice at all, and it's driving me insane. Darling, it's not going to last forever. You will be able to get back to something a little bit more scheduled and a little bit more controlled. But in the meantime, I would say that I think we largely downplay the power and the potency of quick and dirty magic, and just doing things that do fit into the lifestyle, as opposed to thinking of ourselves as being shut out of witchhood because we no longer have time, we no longer have the mental space, you know? I think that instead we can think, okay, what is the quick and dirty thing that I can do that feels potent for me right now, that I know switches up the energy, that I know is witchy inherently, but which like moves into my motherhood as well and kind of ties everything together. I think a lot of mums do that in different ways. I think a lot of mums do that with the music that they choose to play in given situations, you know, the suggestions they make for games that can be played or what the next activity is going to be. That could definitely be witchy. That could have something witchy for the mum or for the parent. It could have something witchy for them without the kids even really being aware of it, right? So you have to think about how you can keep your hand in a way that moves with your lifestyle now, as opposed to being in resistance to it. I think a lot of people are telling themselves that because they can't focus as adequately as they would like to on their practice, they cannot practice, when actually I think there's so much power and potency in the quick, strong actions that link us down to the most primal roots of who we are in our witchhood. I'm personally just thinking about all kinds of little things that I do, from films or quotes that I say that I know have a very magical impact on my day, or they help me to go in a different direction. They help me to call to myself an energy that I might need in that moment. And I bet you've got loads of little references like that as well. Lots of little things that you can suggest or wear or do or say, or songs that you can put on, that kind of thing, where you are practicing your witchcraft all the time as you are a busy mother. But it's in a way that flows with your life, you know, that doesn't make you feel like you're locked out of your witchhood, because you're not locked out of your witchhood. And you have many, many different examples throughout every single day of your witchhood in action through your motherhood. So please don't feel like you are locked out of that room. You're not locked out of that room, but it might not look exactly like the idealized ritual space. I have an hour, I've got all my candles everywhere, everything's tidy, that kind of thing. It might not look like that, but it is your craft, and it takes place in your way, in the way that it makes sense for you. I would love to hear about working with deities, particularly if anyone has worked with Jesus outside of a traditional religious sense. I feel like I keep bumping into him during meditation and such, and I'm not sure what to do with that information, lol. For me, it's kind of complicated because I do have partially a Catholic upbringing, and my relationship with the Holy Mother Mary does come from that upbringing. So in a way, I can say that I have kept hold of a very close connection to this figure from this paradigm. This is such a personal thing. It's so individual. I think that lots of witches do come across Jesus or Mary or saints or figures from the Bible in their meditations, their visualizations, etc., their astral work, and they may choose to pursue that or they may not choose to pursue that. It is very personal to the individual, and there's a lot of dialogue, I think, for every witch around, you know, that they have to have with themselves around religious trauma, around their memories of religiosity from their youth. And so far be it from me to tell you what you should or should not do, but I can reassure you, I suppose at least I can reassure you, that lots of witches do walk with JC. They do work with Jesus. There are lots of witches that work with Mother Mary. I myself am one of them. There are lots of witches that identify as Catholic witches, identify as Christo witches, work with saints, work with Archangel Michael. So you're in good company. I suppose at least I can say that, if that's any reassurance to you at all. But I do know that every individual witch who finds themselves experiencing things from that paradigm coming through does need to just sit with it themselves and figure out, what does this mean to me? Am I okay with this? Is this something that I want? Do I need to just pause and, you know, just sort of move over to the side of the road and ask myself what is going on here and why? And I cannot tell anybody else what their path should look like, and why a witch may or may not be comfortable or uncomfortable with Jesus turning up is completely individual. It's so specific, isn't it, to one person's path, that I could never say there is just this one right action that you should take to figure out whether or not JC is going to be a part of the dynamic for you. But I can say that you are in good company. There are lots of witches that do work with specific beings, disembodied intelligences from within the Christian paradigm. So you're not alone. I can say that for sure. My main issue is just not being able to ever feel like I have energy. I go on autopilot at work, and as soon as I'm not at work, I'm too exhausted to do the things I want and need to get done. I took 9 days off thinking I just needed rest, and it didn't change even a little. I stopped drinking soda last year, and I eat less junk food, and I take vitamins every day. That hasn't helped either. I get 7+ hours of solid sleep a night. I drink water every day. I just don't get it. And there's other people saying that they agree with this as well, and they're in the same situation. That sounds tough. Okay, basically this could probably be a whole video all on its own. But first of all, I would say, when you say that you do not have energy to do the things that you want and need to get done, is it possible that you do need to question what you want and need to get done when it comes to witchcraft? Is it possible that there can be a little bit of negotiation there? What do you want and need to get done? What is the things within witchcraft? Because obviously that's what we're focusing on. That's what the Q&A is about. What within witchcraft do you want and need to get done, and how could that be shifted so that it is a little bit more of a compromise for you and for what you have going on? Sometimes I think we do need to move the goalposts. We need to set different parameters for what it is that we expect from ourselves. And I also want to go back to the previous reflection from the previous question about what actually works for your lifestyle. Obviously you have energy for some things. Can you be kind of working your craft and your witchhood into those things so that it runs into the tapestry of your life, as opposed to being this other thing that is a big sort of chunk of energy drainage that you feel like you can't give enough to? Is it possible that you can walk with your witchhood through your life and through whatever it is that you're doing with your life and feel that you are witching at those times, kind of thing? When I'm looking at this question, I'm seeing that you say that you run on autopilot with work, but then you don't have energy for anything else. So first of all, if you mean that you don't have energy for anything witchy, anything creative, anything social, anything in terms of physical health and well-being, like literally anything, then that could have almost a deeper physiological implication. Like there may be some tests that need to be done, maybe look into that a little bit more, because I do think that the vast majority of people have some kind of energy left over for something when they're not working, but it's a question of having to choose. It's a question of not being able to have your energy cake and eating it, but actually deciding what it is that you're going to spend the energy on. But if it is specifically the witchy stuff that you feel like you don't have the energy for, then I wonder if your idea of what kind of energy you need to spend on witchcraft may need to change, may need to shift, so that it's more in alignment with your lifestyle and with the energetic output that you can give to it. I'm wondering if maybe you are telling yourself a story about what kind of energy expenditure is required when it may not necessarily be the case. That might not necessarily be the case, or at least not for this point in your life. Sometimes we can do big, extravagant rituals. Sometimes we can spend hours and hours in visualization or designing spells and carrying those spells out, performing those spells. We can organize different individual things for every Sabbath. And sometimes we just simply cannot, because other things are going on. But I don't think it means at any point that we are less a witch. We just need to figure out what is going on within our witchhood in terms of time expenditure and energy expenditure. How can we make it align with us instead of putting us in resistance to our witchhood? How can we bring the sense of our witchhood into the time and energy and space that we do have? So I think it's about doing a bit of an inventory of your life and thinking, okay, where am I telling myself I need to spend this much energy to be a witch and to do witchy things? And whereabouts can it actually be kind of reconfigured? Where can I reimagine the amount of energy I need to spend so that it's much lower and much more kind of like cost effective, and I get a good investment on that energy expenditure and I'm not exhausted by the end of it? The question of how much energy it should take to do anything witchy, whether it's a ritual, whether it's using divination, divination, whether it's a spell, whatever it might be. That again is a very individual question, isn't it? It's based on what the variables are in your life and what you are going through and what you want to achieve and how much energy you feel it should take, to be a witch and be witching, which is a verb. For me personally, I feel that I've come from a place where I massively overstated in my own mind and heart how much energy, time, space, effort, money, commitment I had to put in to be a really committed, legitimate witch. And actually, what I've realised is that witching on the fly is okay. Witching on a low budget or no budget is okay. Witching in a way that works for me and does not interrupt what I'm doing with others is okay. Finding the opportunities for spirituality and mystical experience to take place across a spectrum of different events and a spectrum of different circumstances is okay, as opposed to being like, oh my God, I need to be in the circle and I need to be doing this in this exact way. I need to be in sacred space for these things to happen. I've realised that my witchhood is far more potent than that, and it's far more adaptable, it's far more flexible and bendable than that. And I'm just wondering if maybe it needs to be a lot more flexible and bendable and adaptable for you at this point on the journey. And maybe there's a rigid idea of what energy expenditure in witchhood needs to look like for you to actually make it legitimate, and actually we can afford to question those ideas and change them. I struggle with my depression and inability to focus on my practice. I find the focus on daily practice anxiety inducing because I often can't stick to a routine or find the work too draining to do daily. While I love doing readings and ritual, it's hard to come up with questions consistently or have the energy to truly dive into them to the degree that they need addressed. I often feel like a half witch, full of the knowledge and ability to create great change and growth, but lacking the time or energy to create it. This creates a repeating cycle of wanting to do it, not feeling good enough to, not doing it, and then guilting myself for not doing so. Is there a helpful way for me to break this mentality? Yeah, I think first of all, right out of the gate, don't worry so much about the need to have a daily practice. I think that can be anxiety inducing, and I think it's actually not right for everybody. To be honest with you, I think that sometimes practicing in a way that looks from the external like a witchy practice, so sitting in front of an altar, doing a visualization, devotion, meditation, or whatever, practicing in that way isn't what calls to you, and that's okay. For me, I don't go to my altar every single day. Sometimes the way that I'm called to practice looks different. Sometimes I'm really called to practice by reaching out to loved ones instead and just making sure they're okay and delivering my healing energy in that way. Sometimes I feel really called to work out. And if I've only got time to work out or go to the altar and I really feel like called to be embodied and to engage my core and to sweat, then that's what I'm going to do instead, because that feels like the more spiritual avenue. Sometimes I will take my meditation on a morning walk. So instead of sitting at the altar or sitting on my bed, I will go and I will take my meditation on a morning walk and just kind of like take in what's around me. So I do allow for flexibility in the way my practice looks, and I think we can get too hung up on the idea of having to have a actual bona fide witchy daily practice that looks witchy from an external perspective. And actually there's lots of things we do that are witchy that don't look at all witchy from an external perspective. So many people really want to have a very dedicated, very consistent spiritual practice on a daily basis, and they flog themselves mentally for not being able to do that, for finding that that doesn't stick. And I think at a certain point in our lives, we must come to this sort of impasse where we're like, you know what, maybe that's actually not what is calling to me, and maybe that's not how I am at my full spiritual potency. Maybe there needs to be a flexibility of thought around what spiritual practice really is, and maybe it doesn't always need to look like this. Maybe there needs to be less rigidity. There is definitely value in consistency of practice. I'm definitely not going to say that there isn't. I've actually made a video about consistency of spiritual practice and how it can be so helpful, and I will leave that down below. But I definitely think that we can be very, very harsh with ourselves if at certain points in our lives we cannot attain that sense of consistency. It doesn't seem to be working for us. We can't seem to put it into practice, and we tell ourselves, well, that's it, then I'm not a witch, that's it. I can't be consistent, then that means I'm not a witch at all. And I think that is very heavy-handed. I think that is definitely throwing the spiritual baby out with the magical bathwater, and there's no need for that. I'm sorry to get really new age on you for a moment, but there's a prayer from A Course in Miracles that I really, really like. And it goes like this: where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say? And to whom? And obviously that's kind of like you asking the divine, you know, where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What do you want me to say today? And who should I say it to, kind of thing. And I kind of think of my witchhood as a similar kind of thing, or I have a similar relationship to it, where sometimes it's not going to be about altar work. It's not going to be about doing daily draws. It's not going to be about going over and over again to the practice of devotion or the practice of channeled writing. It's going to be something different. And instead of being angry about that or feeling disappointed with myself over that, I'm going to lean into it. I'm going to be like, okay, this is how witchhood is going to look today. That's interesting, you know, and just focus on it from a space of curiosity as opposed to from a space of judgment and a space of, I failed, I really wanted to do this for 30 days, I really wanted to meditate every day, I really wanted to, whatever it is that I felt like I needed to do. You know, instead I have been open. Like, for example, with my devotions with Hel, my matron deity, I definitely felt like I wanted to be in devotional to her every day at a certain point. And I think I've told this story on the channel before, but at one point I was doing a devotional to her, and I guess I was, you know, I mean, I suppose I wasn't overly focused on the fact that I didn't really feel connected, but I noticed that it was a little lackluster, and I was thinking, when is it going to click into this point of potency where it's so consistent and so solid that it feels like this linking in every morning? And I remember her just very clearly sort of communicating to me, sweat to honor me. You know, and really what she was saying to me in that moment was like, go do your workout. That is a devotional to me. Dedicate your effort, your sweat, the engagement of your core, the tension that you hold in your isometric moves on the mat. Dedicate that to me. That's just as good as sitting here going through the beads, focusing on an image of me. You know, give me your sweat. Give me something that is an offering that is from your body. And something just really clicked in my mind in that moment. I was like, oh, wow, okay, it can look all kinds of different ways. It can look all kinds of different ways. So my offerings to Goddess now are much more, they're much more varied. You know, if I am very scared of doing something, if I'm scared of making a certain phone call, if I'm scared of replying to a certain message, if I'm scared of putting something out online, then I will dedicate my courage, my bravery to my Goddess. That can be an offering. So it's just this variation on what is actually possible and what is actually meaningful. And I think a similar thing can happen with daily practice, where we get too caught up in this idea of what it looks like and that it's got to have this very sort of, it's got to be what you would think of a witch as doing for daily practice. And actually, sometimes it just doesn't look like that at all. Sometimes I feel very called to do something that doesn't seem to look very witchy externally, but that doesn't matter. How do you determine what is witchy enough? Sabbats, esbats, daily personal rituals? How do you find the right mix for yourself without feeling like it has to be all or nothing? I love this question. You know, I think that we go through seasons as witches. We do not always stick to the same exact amount of practice and the amount of space and time that we can give to practice. As I've said with previous answers to questions in this Q&A, sometimes we find ourselves at points in life where work takes over or motherhood takes over or whatever it might be. So I do think that we have to give ourselves permission to shape our practice so that it works for us, rather than being very stringent about what it always needs to be, because that is not realistic. For example, I have a back injury, and when my back injury is playing up, my witchcraft practice cannot be the same as it can be when my back injury is not playing up. That's just actually reality, and it would be extremely unwise for me to tell myself otherwise, right? You know, I need to make sure that I am being realistic about the fact that I have certain limitations, certain times where witchcraft can take up more of my time and certain times where it takes up less of my time, but I am no less a witch. And I think in a way what I want to say is that witch is a feeling. You know, it's not just an action that you come to, it's a feeling as well that you have. And I think sometimes even when I haven't witched in essence, you know, in any way that I can point to, it is actually amazing to know that, because I think sometimes when I can't actually point to anything and say I've witched in doing that, I was witching when I did that, I still feel that I am a witch. It's something that one feels. I would love to know down below who else feels that way as well, that it's not just about the actions that one takes, but also just the deep feeling that they are a witch. I mean, put it this way, this is kind of a morbid example, but let's say that you were in this really atrocious, unexpected accident, and you had to spend hours and hours, you know, just like reconnecting with your body, having surgeries, having physiotherapy, whatever it might be. Are you not a witch during that time? Because the idea of doing a ritual for a Sabbath means absolutely nothing to you in terms of what you're going through here with, you know, sorting your body out and healing your broken bones. And, you know, you're still a witch, right? It's just that life happens to have materialized in such a way that you cannot actually recognize the Sabbath right now because it's just not realistic. It doesn't make you any less of a witch. It's a feeling. It's like, you know, in your core that it is that Sabbath, and that inside you are doing something to acknowledge it, to be with it, to carry it through in your decision making, in the words that you say, in the way that you react to the situation that you now find yourself in. You didn't need to carve out sacred space and get a bunch of props together and, you know, do the testicles, spectacles, wallet and watch, bells and whistles thing to know that you were a witch inside. So even if you were like, sort of planted to a hospital bed, thinking about only your physical well-being, your actual bones, your flesh, and you had no time, no space, no rational area of your life where actual witching in any sense could be possible, you still know you're a witch inside. It's a feeling, it's a knowing, it's who you are. It's a part of your identity that you cannot be untethered from, kind of thing. So I think that's worth thinking about too. I seem to practice less when I'm happy. When I was in a bad place, I was constantly at the altar. But now that I'm happy in my life, I'm nowhere near as dedicated. I associated my craft with problem solving and finding ways to struggle through. But now that I'm happier, I don't need that. I want to practice more, but I'm not sure what to do now. That's really, really interesting. Thank you for sharing. First of all, definitely put some protection magic over all the stuff that's making you happy. Make sure that it's nicely, magically maintained, you know, if you're into that kind of thing. I definitely would. I would do some ritual to celebrate it. I would do some ritual to think about everything that it's taught me and all the ways that it's helped me to grow, or how I've grown to be able to experience such wondrous positivity in my life. And then I would do some protection magic over it for definite. And then if I felt like I was in abundance and there was no need for me to do witchcraft for myself really, and I wasn't called to it, I might think about how I might want to use it for others, even if it's just sending positive intentions to them, even if it's not sort of like dedicated spells for people. You certainly could send loving intention to other people, give healing capacity to other people. You may also find that you've moved into an area of your life where you could be more open to research and learning and reading and just being scholarly, enjoying that kind of thing, rather than actually practicing quite so much, doing so much spellcraft, etc. So maybe you could lean into that possibility. You could expand your sense of what witchcraft is about and learn different things about it that you didn't know about before, because you have that capacity now. Perhaps you have that energy that you can kind of reroute in that direction too. The energy of celebration and abundance and joy and positivity can also be very good for offerings for deities and ancestral spirits and stuff like that. So definitely, if you want to give of some of that wondrous abundance and positivity, you can do so by celebrating beings, or celebrating natural environments and energies, forces of nature, whatever it is. It's always good to joyfully celebrate that which you revere. Disillusionment after years of encountering the toxic elements of the pagan and spiritualist community has been terrible for me. Also, I'm healing from when narcissists take on the language of healers. It sounds to me like obviously you've been through some experiences that have been really tough for you in terms of community and in terms of connections with other people and their motivations and their agendas. And I would say, although it's wise for you not to completely close the door on the possibility of having connections if you want them, you may be going through just a phase of being self-possessed, being very much with yourself and very much practicing in solitary mode, and making sure that you are absorbing and integrating all of the lessons that can be taken from the bad experiences that you had, so that you're in a much better position to be a good judge of what is healthy for you going forward and what is not. And you may not yet be in that place where you feel you can rejoin community or reach out for community or take on the kind of messages that people are offering, or have friendships within the spiritual realm, etc., with others. You might not yet feel that you're there, and you might want to be there in the future, but at the moment I think it's okay to be self-contained and to know that you've had a lot of difficulty around the area of like group dynamics and people's agendas and the toxic elements, as you said, of those communities. And that can be very difficult. It takes a lot of processing in order for us eventually to come to this point where we're like, okay, you know what? I know what I want from community. I know what the red flags are. I know what my no compromise zones are. And I know that if I found myself in any kind of situation that was remotely like what happened before, I would remove myself from it lovingly and put up strong boundaries around it. And I think until you know that you can do that, it's perfectly okay for you to be solitary with your practice and know that you are working up to a point in time where you feel you can trust yourself to be able to level with yourself when you need to be distrustful of others or suspicious of others, when there is just a weird energy, a weird vibe. You need to know that you have integrated those lessons and those experiences to the point where you would do something different for yourself going forward, and you would pick up on things much sooner than perhaps you had the ability to in the past, you know? So it's really about thinking, okay, I went through various shit shows in relation to community. Community is a sore point for me. There's some like sort of wounded tissue around that, and therefore it's okay for me to keep to myself until such a time as I feel like I'm in a position to be able to navigate it in a healthy way where my boundaries are not going to be breached. And you know, I really hope that you feel you can at some point, if you want to, open up to the possibility of connecting with people around this theme, because it is so potent to be able to do that. But I also understand you. Like, I have felt the sting of toxic elements of those communities, and you know, it's a fucking process. It is a process, you know, you have to go through, and it's rather more like a dimmer switch than it is like a light switch. You know, you do a bit of healing, you move forward, you feel you've gathered that momentum, then something happens that knocks you back, it triggers you, it makes you feel weird, you retreat back into your hermit crab shell again, you know, and it kind of works like that. It works on that basis. Be gentle with yourself, know that other people have gone through similar things, and it is really tough. My heart goes out to you, darling, and I really hope that at some point you feel more sturdy and you feel like you can rejoin community if that is what you want to do. But it is certainly a process of healing that is required there. I think sometimes it's just about knowing what we are coming to spirituality for as individuals as well, and kind of looking at what's going on and the terrain of what's going on and thinking, okay, never mind any of that. What is my pure intention? What is my sacred work for me? And once we've got really, really right with that, and we feel like it's very connected to who we are now, we're not trying to work with a past paradigm, we're not trying to push through into some idealized future paradigm, but we're really working from the spot where we are now, and from our strong core, and from our beliefs and our awarenesses and our powers and our strengths where we are now, we can feel very rooted and secure in the fact that our spiritual path is not at the mercy of somebody over there, or some group over here, or someone over there that's saying that, or someone over here that's got an agenda with us. It's ours, and nobody can take it from us. And when we feel that secure with it, we then can go back into community or into discussion. We can enjoy discourse with people without feeling that we're going to be rattled or attacked or torn down. But if you know you've been through a series of experiences that did really knock you off your perch and make you vulnerable, it's understandable that you don't necessarily perhaps feel you can do that right now. You know, it takes time. And I think it's about honouring that healing process. I would very much like your advice on how to trust in magic, that it is a real living, breathing thing, and that it's not only for a select few. I often find myself stuck because of the inner over-analytical critic or skeptic. I feel myself not fully stepping into what I could be because I don't fully believe, because I don't fully trust, because I'm scared of being wrong. How do you deal with not having the courage to fully believe in and accept your own capacity for magic? Darling, I think one of the key ways to get out of your own way is just to recognise gently for yourself that you are testing and exploring the waters to see what happens. This difficulty that we have accepting that magic is real, trusting that we can actually do it, etc. Definitely a common one. One of the things I will say is just think about all the stuff that's happened in your life that was really surreal and wondrous and synchronistic and just happened out of nowhere and made you feel like you were plugged into the universe and made you feel like the universe is talking to me and this was put here for me and this is bigger than a coincidence. You know, I think sometimes we need to bring those things to mind when we are getting too into the overly analytical, skeptical, critical mind, I think. And the other thing I would say is there's nothing wrong with recognizing that you might need a little bit of evidence for magic and that you are just kind of exploring what the potential for magic could be, but that you're not going to be completely sold until you do see a little bit of evidence for it. But I think the evidence for it can be closer and more easily obtainable than we think it is. I think often we do not give ourselves enough opportunity to just do casual acts of magic, casual spells to let things come through, to remind us that magic is real. And I talk about this a little bit in my book, Rebel Witch, about how sometimes I've done casual workings just to show myself my own potency. I've done random things, like I've casted for somebody to recommend a film or series to me. I've casted to see an owl in some form at some time. I've casted to hear an old song I haven't heard for a really long time, like at least 5 years. I've casted for song lyrics that I overhear to mean something to me and provide the answer to a question that I have, you know. I've casted for just random things like that, and it's been really interesting to have lots of little ways that magic can come into my life in that regard, and I can see that certain things are possible and certain things are linking up and certain things are coming in as I'm calling them in. But it's not major spellcraft, it's not things that I really deeply desire, but I desire just to see the magic coming into my life in some way, you know? So it's that desire that I use and I ride on to make the spell fly. It's like, I want to see that magic is real, you know. Sometimes you have to cast for seeing that magic is real, and then the more proof that you get, you ball it up into this wonderful little like fudge sweetie confectionery thing, and you're like, oh yeah, I remember that, oh yeah, that happened, oh yeah, that was wild and weird and wonderful. And I do know that there is so much out there that is potent and has pure potential, and that I can be the commander of that potential. I can harness that potential, you know. Sometimes you do need to see and feel something and have something actually materialize, but sometimes you need to be willing to be the one to bring it in. Another thing that you might want to try, that I also talk about a bit in my book Rebel Witch, is magician's mindset. And this is something that I've spoken about also on the channel before, and I will leave a video down below that explains more about magician's mindset. And it's basically just where you put yourself into a mode of being where everything is for you and everything means something, and usually you will time it, you know. So often this is how you recognize synchronicities, because you're open to it in that moment and you're like, oh wow, okay, something external just matched up with something internal that I've been working through or that I've been wondering about, and that is the synchronicity. That's where it is. That's where those jigsaw pieces fit together. But if you haven't had that for a while, if you haven't had that feeling that you wanted something and you brought it in, or you were wondering about something and then the answer appeared, you know, just like the magic and the majesty of the mystery of cosmos. If you haven't had that for a while, I'd recommend that you switch on magician's mindset for 5 minutes. Go for a walk around the block or have a little surf online or whatever. Open up the window and just like put your ear out the window and say, okay, for the next 5 minutes, I'm in magician's mindset. And what that means is I'm not casting a spell, I'm not doing a ritual, nothing like that. But for the next 5 minutes until my alarm goes off, everything that I see and hear and feel and touch and taste and sense is for me in a very specific way. It is something that I'm calling in. This is a window of time where everything is a delivery for me from cosmos. It is a special delivery. And when we do that, we tend to be able to find that we can slip under the hood of that skeptical, overly analytical, sterile, there is nothing magical in the universe kind of mindset that we sometimes get ourselves into. So hopefully that helps as well. Have a little bit of magician's mindset, darling. A dose of magician's mindset, why don't you? Okay, I think that's plenty enough questions. I really, really hope that this Q&A has been useful and has helped you out. Please get at me in the comments down below and let me know what you think and feel about some of the questions I answered. Do you have any tips for any of the people who ask questions, and anything that you want to share about your experience with witchhood, the issues you've had, maybe how you've gotten over them, etc. Yeah, let's bring the comments to life, as we are so good at doing. Much love, darlings, and blessed be. Mwah.